When you think about businesses that are selling through the roof, like Aloe or Allbirds, sure, you think about a great product, a cool brand, and great marketing. But an often overlooked secret is actually the businesses behind the business, making selling, and for shoppers, buying, simple. For millions of businesses, that business is Shopify. Nobody does online business better than Shopify. It's home of Shop Pay, the #1 checkout in the world. You can use it to boost conversions up to 50%, meaning way less carts going abandoned and way more sales going through to checkout. Sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/income, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/income to upgrade your selling today. That's shopify.com/income.
Una silla de masajes puede parecer extravagante. 8 configuraciones diferentes, intensidad ajustable, además es calefaccionado. Y se siente tan bien. Sí, una silla de masajes puede parecer extravagante. Y 2, bueno, aún más. Pero cuando esas sillas de masajes vienen con un auto, se vuelven bastante prácticas. El nuevo Volkswagen Tiguan 2025 con funciones premium como los asientos delanteros con masaje disponibles. Solo parece extravagante.
This content may not be suitable for all audiences. Listener discretion advised.
From Killer Podcasts, true tales of the occult, otherworldly encounters, unexplainable events. This is Disturbed True Paranormal.
First, a house in the woods holds something mysterious lurking in the shadows. Narrated by Blair Garner from Reddit user Hugh Jmanshit.
I've been dog sitting for my parents while they've been out of town. It's a good excuse for my wife and I to enjoy the quiet at their place in the woods. And I always like to help family out when I can. 2 nights ago, around midnight, I had let the dogs out for a quick pee. And they went onto the yard, walking, sniffing about until they abruptly stopped. They just stood dead still, staring into the trees. I squinted, trying to spot something in the darkness, but all I saw were the trees gently swaying in the wind. When I turned back toward the house, I caught a glimpse of something in the kitchen. It was hard to see past my own reflection, but there was someone behind the glass, standing in the dark. I bolted inside, heart pounding, but the figure was gone. I didn't hear footsteps, doors closing, anything. Everything was normal, except the cabinets. Every single one in the kitchen was wide open. They had all been closed just moments before I headed outside. My wife must have heard me rush inside because she came downstairs asking what the hell was going on. I told her I saw a raccoon or something. I didn't want to scare her. She didn't look like she believed it, but she went back to bed anyway. I couldn't sleep after that. I laid in bed listening to the house creak until about 3 a.m. All of a sudden, all 3 dogs simultaneously sat up. They didn't bark, whine, or move at all. They just stared at the hallway like something was coming. Then I heard it. The floorboard creak. It was distinct, like someone was standing right outside our room. I was too afraid to move, so I convinced myself it was just the house making noises again. I closed my eyes, almost pretending to be asleep, until I dozed off. In the morning, I saw my towel outside our room. It was still in the same place I had lazily left it the day before, and the same place where I thought the creak came from. The weird thing is it was now folded, like perfectly folded, in this fancy way I've only seen my mom do, but like I said, she wasn't home. I left it there initially, too creeped out to move it, but then I heard the creak again just moments later. When I returned to the doorway, I found 2 wet human footprints right next to the towel. My wife hadn't walked that way. The prints just appeared. I don't know, maybe I'm losing it, but the dogs have been acting weird ever since. Even my wife has started leaving the hallway light on, but she hasn't said why. I think she, along with the dogs and I, can just feel that something was here.
Next, we'll head deep into a haunted forest, where an invisible presence begins a hunt. Narrated by Andrew Wilson, from Reddit user Obi-Wan Kenobi.
When I was 17, my friends and I had a terrifying paranormal experience while camping. We were in an area of West Virginia that had had a history of trauma and violence. A mother and son drowned in the creek there. An old man hung himself on a dead tree over the water. Some drug dealers were killed in a state police shootout by a cabin. And many years ago, laborers had been killed while building a set of train tunnels that were now rumored to be haunted. All of this happened within just 1 square mile. Anyways, we wanted to have one last hurrah before graduating and going our separate ways. And I guess camping in the backwoods was the easy thing to do. Shortly after dusk on our first night, my cousin and I sat on the bank of a creek, spotlighting fish in the water. We were maybe 20 yards away from the campfire and our other 2 friends. Slowly, we began to hear a rhythmic slosh, like someone was wading through the water nearby. We shined the flashlight all around, looking for the source of the noise, but it stopped. When our search was unsuccessful, we turned the flashlight off and went back to our conversation. Then it started again. It was unmistakably moving nearby. We whipped out the flashlight again, and nothing. No sound, no movement. We realized that the sloshing would stop the moment we turned the flashlight on and begin again when it turned off. It was reacting to us. My stomach started twisting. None of this made sense, and both my cousin and I were feeling really nervous about what it could mean. We decided it was best to just ignore it and rejoin our friends at the fire. We got up and headed back towards the camp. But the sloshing followed. It trailed behind us, getting closer and closer as it picked up speed. Eventually, it reached the shore, but that didn't slow it down. It ran through the tall grass, closing in just as we reached camp. We turned around and looked toward the noise, but again, nothing was there. The only thing we saw was the brush jostling like an invisible figure was running through it. Once we reached our friends, it cut to the right and began encircling our camp. At the same time, I heard a voice directly next to my ear. "You shouldn't be here." I jerked my head to my left, but no one was there. I saw all my friends do the same. They had heard it too, just inches from their own ears. It was garbled, but we were able to make out the repeated messages. It was saying we shouldn't be there and we needed to leave. We were all freaking out, and before we could even process what was happening, we heard a final, forceful message. "You need to leave." We all panicked, screaming at each other to run as we made a mad dash to our ATV. When we got close, we saw something that stopped us dead in our tracks. A tall, black shadow was relaxing against the hood. It was shaped like a man, but it had no legs. Instead, the bottom of the shadow faded into a wisp. When it saw us, it straightened up and stared at me. We were all completely frozen. My friend broke the silence with a scream, snapping us and the shadow out of this trance. Then the shadow flew away in the blink of an eye, seemingly headed toward the haunted train tunnels. We took our cue and hopped inside the ATV. I jammed the key into the ignition, trying again and again to start it as it stalled. Finally, the engine roared and we drove out as quickly as possible. A few months after the incident, my uncle went raccoon hunting in those woods. He wound up at the hospital, almost completely paralyzed after a rock fell and hit his neck. For years, we wondered how he made it back to his ATV and drove himself out. His story just didn't totally add up. He's a salt-of-the-earth hunter, farmer, and working man, so he always plays his cards a little close to his chest. Eventually, he admitted that after he was hit, a shadowy figure appeared. The same one I had seen. The shadow picked him up off the ground and put him back in the ATV, allowing my uncle to drive himself to the hospital. I always thought the shadow was what chased us, but hearing my uncle's story has changed my mind. I think it was the one whispering, warning us that we were in danger and needed to leave. But that begs the question, what would have happened if we stayed?
Finally, an enormous demon haunts a broken home. Narrated by Ashley Hargrove from Reddit user TrueStation1172.
So the year was 1997, and I'd just gone through a divorce with my now ex. It was my first night back at home, only didn't feel like home at all. This place had been a place of warmth, of love, of connection. But when I pulled into the driveway, the old unlit wooden structure from the 1800s resembled a mass of black, a void that only took the shape of a house by coincidence. There wasn't a single sound as I walked through the old house that was once home. The bare walls that had once shown an array of framed pictures of what was once a happy family stared back at me with a blank expression, mocking me with eyes that were left from the nails that had been removed. A lot of the furniture was now gone, making the inside of the structure look even more vast, more cold, as if I didn't already feel small. After my initial walk through the foreign tundra, I set my keys on the kitchen counter, took my boots off, and headed upstairs to my bedroom to try and sleep. I had no clue what was in store for me that night. I made my way up the stairs, causing the wooden treads to squeak and creak, just as they had many times before. But that night, it was different. The sounds were more visceral, like they were warning me not to ascend, but I proceeded onward. I made my way to my bedroom and lay down on my back, clothes still on. I spent hours there in a daze, thoughts and memories racing like a ribbon of film on a Super 8 projector. I couldn't fall asleep, and the red glow from my alarm clock never ceased to remind me so. Then, around 2 a.m., it happened. As I lay there lost in my thoughts, suddenly I heard a long smash coming from the kitchen downstairs. It shook the floor beneath me, sending a chill up my spine and making the hairs on my arms standing on end. I was frozen in fear, keenly aware of my own aspirated breaths and thumping heartbeat. Then more noises came. They were barely audible at first, but then they became louder and louder. Footsteps. They were slow, heavy, methodical. As they grew closer to the stairwell, I began to hear the breathing and growling of what could only come from a monster. A demon. And it was going to rip me apart. It thumped its way up the stairs, continuing to grow louder until each step shook the whole house. It must have weighed 800 pounds. I couldn't cower in my bed any longer. I ran into my closet, grabbed my 12-gauge shotgun, and racked a shell into the chamber. Suddenly, there was silence. Nothing. I was so scared that I stayed in my closet until sunrise. When I finally decided to make my way downstairs, shotgun still in hand, I found a mess. The silverware drawer had been pulled out completely from the cabinet and was lying upside down, utensils strewn all over the kitchen floor. And the front door was wide open. I know that this seems hard to believe, but this 100% is true. I wasn't dreaming, and I've never taken drugs in my life. As a religious person, I believe that this happened because I lost faith during the divorce. I was severely depressed, in a dark place, and had been going to church. After that night, I started going to church every Sunday, and I haven't had a visit from that thing ever since. I still live in that same old house today. And although there are many other stories I could tell, none of them are as terrifying or as visceral as that experience.
Want more Disturbed? Check out our Patreon for member-exclusive content, early merch access, and other cool perks. I'm your host, Doug Bailey, and this has been Disturbed, a production of Killer Podcasts and part of the Evergreen Network. For more paranormal and true crime shows, visit killerpodcasts.com. Follow our social channels at Disturbed Podcast on Instagram or Disturbed_pod on Twitter. If you enjoyed the show, please consider subscribing and reviewing on your favorite listening platform. Share your own true horror story at disturbedpodcast.com. Music by Epidemic Sound and by Carl Casey at White Bat Audio. Our producer is Declan Roars. Audio engineering by Nathan Corson, Will Pritz, and Sean Rule Hoffman. Executive producer Bridget Coyne. Until next time, stay safe out there.